Hello friends, welcome to FDR India. Let's talk about Mahatma Gandhi today with Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Hello sir.
Hello, Ankit.
So of all the Indian leaders, there have been many freedom fighters in the Indian independence struggle, but Mahatma Gandhi's stature has been above all of them. What was his unique contribution to the Indian independence struggle and to the country as a whole?
Not only country, Ankit, humanity itself. In the past 1,000 years, there are very few human beings who match Mahatma Gandhi's stature. And that's why his impact is growing globally. And he is seen as an example in many liberation movements, in many freedom struggles, in many environmental movements, and movements for human rights or women's rights or rights of the oppressed, in every which way. Why? Because it's very rare in human society for a person to embody complete integrity. Your thought, your word, and your deed, they're all the same. There's no gap between these. That requires a very high level of elevation. It's almost a spiritual thing. Gandhiji achieved that. He was not a great scholar. He was not a gifted orator. But he was an exceptional leader because his thought, word, and deed, they all fused. And everything about him is integrated. And the reason why the world worships him is that he gave a new method. For millennia, for thousands of years, violence and bloodshed was the way of change. For the first time in human history, Gandhiji proposed and adopted and achieved change through peace and non-violence. He argued that violence is not the means of change. You can actually bring about change through non-violence. And he proved it. And that's the reason why he became such an icon globally. And as far as India is concerned, freedom would have come irrespective of Mahatma Gandhi. There are many countries that became free. There were no Gandhis there.
Right.
Because the historical circumstances globally, global power relations and circumstances, will force countries to give up control over territories which can no longer hold. But there was no way a nation could have been built out of disparate people of so many languages, cultures, castes, regions, religions, without Mahatma Gandhi. So his greatest contribution, he built a nation. He made us all look at ourselves as one country. That our collective dreams, our collective aspirations, our collective needs are the same. We may be speaking different languages or practicing different faiths, but we are one. He gave us that sense of unity, of purpose. And therefore he built a nation.
Right.
That was his greatest contribution to India. And for the world, for all humanity, including India, he gave us a method in human relations, how to transform a society, how to bring about change without hatred and violence.
So what has been Gandhi's influence on your life?
It's not merely me. Millions of people born during freedom struggle or in the first generation after freedom. Everything around you is about Mahatma Gandhi. His mythology, his impact on human minds was so great. You go to any village, people say Gandhi visited this. He could not have visited all these villages.
Right.
Impossible. But then the profound impact he made by his personality, his beliefs and his practice of his beliefs and his teachings and his building of leadership in the country was such that even if he visited, let's say, out of 100 villages, one place he visited, that became the most important memory in the lives of almost everybody in those villages. So without Gandhiji, they could not even imagine an Indian society, an India as a united entity. That was the backdrop. In every village, there was not a village without a Gandhiji statue, not like today, the crass exhibition of political power or polarization. It was genuine adoration and admiration and love for a great soul. And because Gandhiji built extraordinary leadership, his great genius was not only that he rose to be an exceptional human being, but he built from ordinary mortals extraordinary leaders. No other country saw the emergence of so many leaders, a galaxy of leaders of stature, of moral courage and integrity, and competence as India had seen, thanks to Mahatma Gandhi. In a country where we believe in theory X, the boss is always right, so leaders are not allowed to grow. Gandhiji was completely different. He dominated our minds not by virtue of power or tyranny, by the power of his example, by the incredible relevance of his arguments in making our lives better, not by control. And therefore, thousands of leaders grew up under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, and they became themselves leaders of great stature. And the first generation, we were all born in the first generation of independence. The first generation, the leaders were all influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. Therefore, corruption and personal aggrandizement were unthinkable. So we committed mistakes, embracing a foolish notion of pseudo-socialism without the genuine elements of equity, embracing centralization of power, an economic model that would be ruinous for the country. We committed mistakes. But even if they committed mistakes because of inadequate experience, their notion of leadership and example and personal conduct was influenced entirely by Gandhiji's life. And that's the reason why they deserve our respect even if they committed mistakes. So we were in the midst of that.
Right.
But unfortunately, as time progressed, Gandhiji's impact, after all, it only would last up to a point.
Right.
If the world is teaching you different lessons, a certain conduct is what gives you advantage. And Gandhian conduct is no use. You only have to sacrifice and give up. You don't get anything in return. Then more and more people embrace non-Gandhian methods. And that's what our politicians and those in authority in the country did.
Right.
And increasingly, we now pay lip sympathy to Mahatma Gandhi, ignoring the basic tenets of Mahatma Gandhi.
Right. So talking about Gandhian ideas, let's talk about his ideas on economy. He talked about a theory of simple living. He himself embodied that. He also talked about self-sufficiency. So in that, and he also talked about agrarian India, basically focusing on agriculture. So in current day and age, how does it fare well for a global economy that is driven by consumerism? And also we have seen the rise of protectionism. So how does it fare well for India's economy now?
See, the broader principles underlying Mahatma Gandhi's pronouncements must be understood. If Gandhiji said village republics, in today's context, an agrarian village is no longer the sole source of prosperity. Because agriculture became a very small part of the larger consumption of goods and services. Whereas Gandhian era and pre-Gandhian era, agriculture was the most dominant thing. Eating food and making enough food to survive is the most important thing. But now we are way beyond that stage. Therefore, we are looking at 1,000 other needs because basic agricultural needs are met for humanity. And therefore, to you, a village as or agriculture as the sole source of livelihood is no longer relevant. But what you should look at is, Mahatma Gandhi gave two cardinal principles. One, Gandhiji's talisman said, in a very desperately poor country like India, when you are in doubt about doing something, when you are in power, you have influence, you can decide what will happen in the collective sphere. When you are in doubt, is it right or wrong? Think of the poorest man in the farthest corner. He did not say, go and help him. He said, if what you do gives him a measure of control over his life, if it makes him more self-sufficient, if it allows him to stand on his own feet, then that is worth doing. So basically, he's talking about empowerment in every sense, economic, political and social. He's talking about teaching him how to fish rather than feeding him a fish meal. That's what gives dignity. That makes the person self-sufficient. That's what empowers him. That's what makes him self-reliant. That makes him proud. That gives dignity. People forgot that. In fact, our politics is completely the opposite. Instead of empowering people, making them self-sufficient, we made them dependent on the state, not doing what the people deserve to get from the government, the collective needs being met. We failed there spectacularly. We converted this into a straightforward transaction. I give public money to you, not my money. I pretend that I am the benefactor, and you give the vote to me and I'll be in power. I'll abuse power. This is now the equation. That's not what Gandhian ethic was. The second thing is he fought for decentralization.
Right.
Where a village as a unit, the way traditional villages were, perhaps is not really viable. But the basic idea is not village or town. It's about power being as close to the people as possible. Decentralized power. Because that's what true democracy is. That's what true economic decision making is. Even in society, in well-functioning societies, the family is the fulcrum. That is the unit of governance. Only when the family cannot handle it, you give it to a larger entity, maybe a community of stakeholders. If all our children go to the same school, if all of us need the same facility, then we together should decide. And where you cannot identify a community of stakeholders very clearly, then a local government as local as possible. Where economies of scale or the complexity demand that you have to do on a larger scale, then you go to a larger, bigger government, maybe a provincial government. Where the whole nation has to be one entity in defense or currency, then it's a national government. That is the principle of subsidiarity. Gandhiji basically taught this. He wanted people to exercise power locally, as far as is practicable. And the question to be asked is not why did you give power locally, but why did you transfer power centrally? That means you must give an explanation why power is taken away from the people, gave it to a more centralized entity. Whereas in India, the norm we accepted is power is central by gratis, by the grant of power by the central agencies, the state or national, you get something. That's exactly opposite of Gandhian ethic. He believed in subsidiarity. He believed in real power vesting in the citizen and his environment locally. And only to the extent required because of complexity or scale, there are certain powers are transferred to larger entities. That means it's in ever-enlarging circles. In Gandhiji's conception, there is no central government. The citizen is the universe. The citizen is the center of the universe. Then the local government. Then a bigger circle, the larger entity called the state. Then a much larger entity called the nation. We completely converted, made hierarchical. We call it central government. Even our language betrays our prejudice. There is no central government in our constitution. There is no central government in Gandhian thinking. The people are the centers of the universe.
So speaking about decentralization, as much as Gandhiji was a champion of decentralization, you are also a champion of empowering local governments genuinely. But over the last many decades, we have not been able to do that, in spite of having the amendments, the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments. So where are we failing in this?
There are two central factors. Because of initial opposition to local governance, and for good reasons the opposition was there. Dr. Ambedkar argued quite rightly that in a caste-ridden hierarchical system, for centuries when villages are dense of casteism, and therefore asymmetry of power by virtue of birth, not by virtue of competence. That's what caste system is. Then excessive local empowerment in traditional local habitats will perpetuate the caste system as his fear. It was a legitimate fear. But there's an answer to that. If you enlarge the constituency, local government constituency or jurisdiction, beyond the traditional village, traditional hierarchical caste-ridden village, then democracy asserts beyond caste, because numbers are more important than the local traditional influence. So the answer lies in not making the traditional village the unit of government, but creating a bigger entity, what in China they call counties, in America they call counties or whatever. That was the answer. Instead of finding that creative answer to a real problem, there was hostility to local governments. Therefore, they paid lip sympathy to local governments. They created the union and the states. States were weaker initially, but over time, for a variety of reasons, because they came up together, because the real politics operates at the state level and assembly constituency level, the states became dominant. Now the states are the all-powerful institutions in India, not the union. The destiny of the state is now in the hands of the state government, in a large measure. But local governments were not institutionalized. They came in 58 or so, very reluctantly, starting with Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh. Some parts they did well, some other parts they didn't care. And because there was no constitutional status, they were all, over time, again, they became victims of centralization during emergency and after that. And local governments died. Then with good intentions, the second part of the problem is the design. One is history,
Right.
second is design. A good design should have been what Germany has done. German Constitution, Article 28, German Basic Law, they call it, Section 28, in about 53 words, it gave the essence of local governments. That they must be self-governing, empowered adequately resourced, accountable local governments. That's the essence. That much Constitution guaranteed. Now, how they are constituted, the detailed operations, they left to the legislature of the state. What did we do? The exact opposite. How they are constituted in minute detail, unlike any other constitution on planet Earth, we incorporated in the Constitution itself. 7,700 words were written in 73rd, 74th Amendments. That is larger than the whole of American Constitution with all the amendments over the past 230 years or so. With all the amendments. Larger than American Constitution. But we created a monstrous structure of over-structured system. Minutely you decide how the village is elected, village panchayat is elected, without any real empowerment. Underpowered. So the design is completely faulty. So much so what happened? Post-independence, even though local governments came only in 1958-59, even though only in some parts of the country they functioned well, 28 powerful chief ministers came from local governments. Their careers were made because of the reputation they built in local governments. Freedom struggle during British time, some of our most celebrated leaders came from local governments. Sardar Patel, Vithalbhai Patel, Babu Rajendra Prasad, Jawaharlal Nehru himself, or Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, Chittaranjan Das, Subhash Chandra Bose, Prakasham Pantulu, a host of leaders rose through local governments. And 28 chief ministers after independence in a short span of time from 58, 59 to say 75, 76. That's all local governments were given a chance in some parts of the country. Post 93, 94 amendments to the Constitution, 73rd, 74th amendments, only 2 chief ministers came from local governments. One of them did not become a chief minister because of local governments. M.K. Stalin became chief minister. He was mayor of Chennai. I don't think anybody seriously would argue that he became chief minister because he functioned earlier as mayor. Because he's the son of Karunanidhi. In a dynastic succession politics prevalent in most parts of the country, in most parties, he came as a successor to his father, not as a former mayor. The only other person who came through local governments is Devendra Fadnavis. There's no other name in 30 years plus. So the design is so faulty. We are pretending as if we have genuine local governments. No, we do not have genuine local governments. We have the weakest local governments in the world, with the possible exception of Kerala. Now we have to address that challenge.
So you talked about design, the design of the local governments. So is it a case that our quest for uniformity of governments throughout the country, we created a different kind of a structure that is not actually relating to the reality? I mean, if we left the power to the states to design each local government, wouldn't it be difficult to manage across the states?
Again, I don't have to give an argument. The states were the masters of the local government design from 1958 to 1970s.
Right.
I told you how many leaders emerged from the local governments, how much of good work they have done.
Yes.
I grew up in a village. My local government was so effective. I'm talking about 1950s and 60s. A black-topped road, regular bus transport service, electrification of village. I'm talking about 1950s and 60s. A good quality school with a proper building, etc. Piped water supply. And many more. Everything came from the local government leadership. In the 60s, mostly in my village. I'm a beneficiary of that. Without that, tens of thousands of us would not have had proper schooling. Would not have had any exposure to anything called modernity. Would not have emerged from the shackles of poverty and backwardness. So proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Right.
The principle must be upheld. Basic principle. But it must adapt it to your conditions locally. To your genius, to your experience, to your own history and culture. For instance, in those days when there were hardly any urbanization, we developed a model called Zilla Parishad. And the rural local governments are different from urban local governments. And we didn't know any synergies between two. It's a very unwise model today because urbanization is inevitable world over. And natural urbanization is happening. Therefore, treating them as separate entities is a very, very unwise notion today. So you must give space for that. All this will happen only when the decisions are made locally based on local history and experience and judgment. And then when 1,000 flowers bloom, when many efforts are made, we'll see what works where. Something worked here, something did not work there. So maybe the best practice will be adopted. If you centralize everything, have a uniformity model. Unity is not uniformity. One important thing we must all realize. Uniformity is different from unity. Unity of India is sacrosanct, paramount. That does not mean uniformity of India. In fact, it is the diversity of India that guarantees unity of India. The more uniformity you impose, the less united the country will be. The basic principles of democracy, decentralized power, accountability, authority and accountability fusing, and the basic thrust on the role of the state, rule of law, basic infrastructure, quality education at least at school level, quality health care. All these are universal principles. But how to actually operationalize within the broad principles must be highly localized. It depends on local genius, local leadership, and experimentation. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Right. So another Gandhian ethic was in the way he dealt with opposition to his ideas by different sections of the society, and also how he opposed the policies, certain policies of the British government then. Is there a learning for the political parties right now?
Not only political parties, human beings.
Okay.
Today we have the narcissism of small differences. We disagree on a small thing, we forget 95 areas where we are all together. Instead of working together on the 95 areas, the one area where we have some disagreement, we are focusing on that, we are highlighting that, we are magnifying it, we are making mess of our lives and promoting hatred. That is idiocy. Not only is it immoral, it's impractical, it is stupid. Gandhiji intuitively understood that. So Gandhiji always looked at what are the areas of collaboration. He never looked at the 1% or 5% where we may disagree. He looked at the 95% where we agree. So his style of argument and discussion is first agreeing with the adversary. One, there is now a framework for collaboration, working together rather than enmity. And two, you have disarmed the opponent. When you first respect his beliefs and accept whatever you can accept, then you actually made the enemy weaker. You made the enemy a friend. So both tactically and strategically, it's a sensible thing. Today, many of us think that we are smart, we are idiots. By exaggerating the differences and by polarizing, by narcissism of the small differences, magnifying them, we are creating a framework where we cannot work together. We can only fight at each other, fight with each other at cross purposes. That's a very stupid way of building a society. Right. Even a family, even a wife and husband, however much they are in love, do you think they agree with each other 100%? Then that means one person is a slave of the other. Unless you are a slave, you cannot ever agree 100% on any issue. It is humanly not possible. Unless you are an absolute idiot without a brain, or you are a slave. Even two brothers, even if they are twin brothers, even if uniovular twins, identical twins, still they would have different views. That is the way we are programmed. Therefore, what are the areas of collaboration? And when we disagree, is it because the facts are understood differently? Is evidence appreciated differently? Is there a logical problem? Or is there some different kind of analysis and innovation that we have to understand? And let us see how best we can collaborate. If we can't collaborate, we still disagree, let's agree to disagree until the stage comes when we all agree. Like experience teaches us something is right, something is not right. That is the way humanity progressed for 12,000 years. Or perhaps even 100,000 years, ever since speech was developed. Magnifying minor differences and finding ways of not collaborating, hating each other, is what idiots do. If they think they are smart, no, they are not. They are idiots, self-destructive, delusional idiots. Gandhiji taught us that more than anything else. There is so much to unite us. Across cultures, races, languages, religions, there is so much that unites us. focus on that. Differences, will resolve them in time.
Right. So another one of the milestones in the India's independence struggle was the Poona Pact between Gandhiji and Dr. Ambedkar in 1932. What is the significance of that pact, and how has it impacted the political unity of India?
See, Ambedkar quite rightly was fighting for the subaltern, the people who are discriminated on account of religion, particularly the Dalits and untouchables. There is no greater travesty of justice and of humanity than untouchability in India. Let's face it. Ambedkar was quite rightly, deeply, deeply troubled by that, as was Gandhi. Ambedkar thought, and that's why he was wrong, that a separate electorate, on the lines of the communal electorate, by the time already the Muslims got a separate electorate, separate voting blocks. And that in a large measure led to the partition of India eventually. He wanted a communal electorate to the scheduled castes, thinking that once they have voice in proportion to their numbers and elected only by the Dalit community, therefore nobody can oppress them or suppress them, then they will hold their own. The basic idea was right, that they must have adequate representation to express their desires and wants and voice and aspirations was the right one. But the method that Ambedkar adopted or articulated was completely wrong. Gandhiji said, over my dead body. Already on communal electorate basis, India divisions are deepening. If you create one more schism, this country can never be united. Because Gandhiji's greatest genius is unifying India and giving a sense of nationhood. He built a nation from disparate peoples. Finally, they came to an agreement. All right, we give adequate voice to the Dalit community in terms of numbers. That's what reservation is. Ambedkar didn't even expect that much in terms of numbers. He didn't want that much. Some compromise came. That is where both the leaders, great leaders that they were, both the leaders were wrong. Gandhiji's opposition to communal electorate was absolutely right, but his answer was the wrong one. Ambedkar's recognition that in a caste-ridden society, Dalits will not automatically be allowed to become leaders in a collective electorate was right. But reservation is not the answer. Both found the wrong answer. What was the right answer? If you have to give voice in proportion to the population of this community which is long suppressed, there is a model called proportional representation. If you give representation in proportion to the vote that a party gets or that an idea gets, then automatically that voice will be heard. You cannot suppress it, but in a much more sensible way. Not reservation of constituency, not in a crass way, there will be real empowerment. And many distortions that happened later, vote buying and populism of the worst possible kind and polarization for vote gathering, that probably would have been avoided. So the problems both posed were real. But the answer these two great men came up with is the wrong answer. I'm not saying with arrogance, I'm saying with humility, because we have the hindsight of history.
Right.
They did not have that. I wish they had that. India would have been better off.
Right. Right. So 2nd October also happens to be birth anniversary of one of our prime ministers, Lal Bahadur Shastri. What are your thoughts on his prime ministership and his ideas on economy?
Lal Bahadur Shastri was a part of a galaxy of leaders influenced profoundly by Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay.
They never thought that they were different from Gandhi or Gandhianism. They were entirely influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. Even those who disagreed with Mahatma Gandhi on certain fundamentals, they were so much under the influence of Gandhiji's personality because his thought, word and deed were the same. He was the closest approximation to a saint in political life in the world, probably in human history. And that's why his impact, even among the very highly educated, learned scholars, even when they disagreed with Gandhiji on certain issues, their respect and love for Mahatma Gandhi was unbelievable. Lal Bahadur Shastri was one of those. He completely embraced the Gandhian ethic, came from abject poverty and difficulty, maintained a very high level of integrity that Mahatma Gandhi taught throughout his life, did not treat power as an end. He always treated power as a means, an opportunity with great humility. And he lived a life of absolute simplicity in the Gandhian traditions. Two stories, that we hear about his life, they are very heartwarming. They tell us how Leadership then was different. Today, even at a municipal corporators level or councillors level or a panchayat sarpanch level, we can't really in many cases expect that conduct. One was Gandhiji's son, I think Anil Shastri or Sunil Shastri, one of them. He went to a college in Delhi, admitted there. The principal did not know he was the Prime Minister's son. He was asked the name, he gave the name. He said, "Who is your father?" He said, "LB Shastri." He did not say Lal Bahadur Shastri. When he was asked, "What does your father do?" He said, "No, he works in government." Can you imagine today's world, let alone a Prime Minister, even ordinary piddly minister at a state level or an MLA or a municipal councillor, that the principal would not know that the municipal councillor's son or the municipal chairman's son is not is a student? See the utter simplicity and humility. The second story, I believe when he was Minister Home, and everybody knew that he was likely to be Prime Minister after Nehruji's passing. He was more or less Nehru's successor in the last years of Nehru's life. They had no personal car. So the family, kids always ask him, "You're a Home Minister of India, you don't have a car, buy a car." He said, no, there's no money. If I become Prime Minister, I'll buy it. He used to joke. He became Prime Minister. So he had to honor his word. He had to borrow money for a car loan to be repaid on a monthly basis as Prime Minister of India and then buy a car. And I understand that after his unfortunate demise in harness while he was Prime Minister, I think that loan was waived or something subsequently. Or from whatever dues are due to him, maybe they must have deducted it. But a man like that became Prime Minister. And power did not make a difference to his life or lifestyle. Power is for a purpose. Power is not for self-aggrandizement. Power has a moral element. It's about morality, public morality. So he reflected Gandhiji's ideals in terms of public morality in a remarkable way, and that's the reason why India embraced him. Though he was only Prime Minister for about 19 months, from May, June of 1964 to January 1966 when he died in Tashkent. Shastri's image is so imprinted on Indian psyche that people who were Prime Ministers for 10 years, 15 years, but Shastri is remembered more fondly than probably most of these people.
Sir, you said a man of that kind became the Prime Minister. We had the same electoral system then as we have now. So why are we facing challenges?
As we discussed earlier, the impact of Gandhi's ethic on Indian governance and politics lasted for about a generation. Because most of these people were trained by Gandhiji, influenced by Gandhiji, they lived the life of Mahatma Gandhi. That's the expectation of the people, that's the behavior of the leaders. So from 1947 to, let's say, early 1970s or late 60s, for about 20-25 years, even when they committed mistakes, their socialist model was wrong. Their centralization was a disaster. And their absence of focus on education and healthcare of quality, they are still paying a price. There are many things wrong. But these are honest mistakes committed because of bad judgment or inadequate experience. But their conduct ethically and their conception of power was a very moral one. And once distance separated from Mahatma Gandhi time, and two, once certain mistakes were committed with inadequate understanding of how to run the country or our democracy, the failures on account of the mistakes committed meant the distance between the people and the leaders grew. And B, as a terrible economic model of centralization of power, license, permit, control, Raj, without any local governments, that meant that slowly the people in power became all powerful for personal aggrandizement at the cost of the people. Therefore, the dominant impulse in acquiring power was no longer public good. It is personal gain.
Right.
So those two became inevitable, and therefore from 70s onwards you saw all the distortions in political behavior and public conduct.
Right. Thank you for sharing your perspective on Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you.